The City of London has been well established as one of the world's leading financial centres. It really is the heartbeat of the UK economy, where we have around 500,000 workers that come to the city every day to work in the financial services sector. So it's an attractive target.
London is the classic global city. It's built up, particularly in the last 20 years, an enviable reputation for being a marvellous place to visit and to enjoy entertainment on a huge scale with great variety. And so from that point of view, the greater the reputation, the greater the response that is likely to come from a strike which works.
There's a rich history, unfortunately, of the city being targeted by Irish Republican terrorism in the 70s and 80s in particular, and of course in the 90s, the two very large vehicle bombs that we had here in 1992, St Mary Axe, and 1993, the Bishopsgate bomb.
I was right here in this same apartment at that time. It was a clear, sunny Saturday morning. My wife and I were engaged in a bit of spring cleaning around the place, and then suddenly this great boom from across to the east made it very clear to me that we didn't have another incident. And just craning our necks round the side of our flat, we could see the great cloud of smoke and dust.
The huge blast, only 100 yards or so from the site of the 92 bomb, damaged more than 130 buildings in the financial heart of London. Over 200 tons of glass rained into the streets, and debris from the explosion fell over 2 miles away in Hackney. The crater blown in the city's main artery was deep enough to take a couple of London buses. There would have been several thousand casualties if the bomb had been planted on a weekday. The clear objective had been to destroy the credibility of the City of London as a place for banks to do business.
The aim of IRA attacks in the 1990s was economic disruption. It was to damage the economic reputation of the UK, primarily based in the square mile. In the very early 1970s, Belfast set up an actual ring of steel, which was a set of 10-foot high steel gates which encircled the city centre in Belfast. So in London, what they particularly wanted to do was to avoid the sort of fortress feel of Belfast. So they put in place a much more technologically advanced solution, which led them to reducing down the entry points into the city from around 30 to 7 for traffic and 1 for buses to enter into the city, so they could track vehicles as they came into and exited the city.
If you were to have looked at it in the early 90s, you'd have seen a series of red and white plastic blocks filled with concrete, creating temporary chicanes. And those were used to slow down the vehicles, stop the driver, speak to them, and often to search the back of the vehicle to make sure there was no bomb in there. When it was decided to make it more of a permanent fixture, the residents and businesses in the city were consulted, and that resulted in all of those temporary measures being concreted in, and where necessary, as you see behind me, a police box being installed to give it some formality and to soften the look on the city environment. It became really a regular part of city life. It was accepted by city workers, by city residents as being necessary to protect the square mile at that time.
The challenge for us now is the international terrorism threat which targets people. And you can go back to 2005, for example, the London bombings and the Aldgate bomb here that we suffered, where commuters and people were targeted. The more diverse nature of the terrorist threat now means that we face both a combined threat from organised groups and cells, as we saw, for example, at the London Bridge attack, to the lone actor threat, where we have individuals who go out and act on their own spontaneously. And it is those threats that are very difficult to mitigate against, and that's why the City of London Police has developed new ways of trying to detect hostile actors.
So the sorts of recent attacks that we've seen in London around rampaging gun and knife attacks and vehicle rammings are examples of terrorist attacks that have to be dealt with in a very different way to the economic terrorism that the IRA were trying to inflict in the 1990s.
The police and the security services are very aware that we cannot defeat or prevent terrorism on our own. Within the city, our residents and business communities are consulted on new ways of tackling terrorism. You know, the visible presence of police as a reassurance measure will always be there, but actually we have to be smarter in our thinking around how we design out terrorism. We work hand in hand with the private sector around the design of new structures, and in the east of the city, you'll have seen the east of the city is growing quickly upwards into the sky. New buildings, thousands of extra workers coming in. The areas around them need to be protected, the buildings need to be protected, and we work together to design new ways of doing that.
Cities and the spaces within cities are continually changing to meet the requirements of contemporary life. A few years ago, the idea of larger, clear, open spaces was seen to be an attractive way of delivering the sorts of space people like to use.
If we look across the rest of London, we see many examples of fortress urbanism, we see good examples of unobtrusive security. So the balustrades down either side of Whitehall, for example, are examples where bollards have been stealthily disguised in concrete in fitting with a public realm improvement strategy.
You're seeing asset strengthening plans incorporated within planning applications, and if they're not there at the beginning, then the planning officers make sure that they are brought in at later stages.
Although the nature of security concerns has changed over the years, what we've always tried to do is absolutely not make that manifest in sort of the public areas, etc., but to try and build it into the base of buildings so that they are secure themselves, and also through architectural devices like sculpture and around Bloomberg, creating the water feature, that those facilities can actually create the security. So we don't want it to look like Fortress City, and we want people to feel comfortable in the city, but equally we recognise that it is a real issue and that we have to deal with it.
We obviously have intelligence pictures, and we can understand the future threats. We can provide our businesses and also our residents with ways of designing out crime, ways of approaching their own personal security and safety, and also physically protecting themselves when they're walking around the city.
I'm a great believer in contingency planning, thinking about the scenarios, thinking about the thing that you think would never happen. And as people have moved online, the threat of terrorism also moves online, and therefore that infrastructure becomes a target in itself. And for us, it's about ensuring that that infrastructure is protected, that online is protected, but also reputationally, that here in London is the best place to do business right across the globe. And it's our job to ensure that that safety exists around that.
As we saw back in the early 90s with the IRA threat and the large vehicle-borne bomb, both the police, the City of London Corporation and businesses in the city have been adept at reacting to those threats, and we're confident that whatever is thrown at us in the future, we'll be able to again adapt to those threats through the use of technology and other tactics to make sure that we keep people in the city safe.
It's an exciting opportunity which is wholly achievable to make the City of London the safest place to live and work in the world. And that is the ambition. And that isn't too tall to reach either, because we have an infrastructure built with the best businesses arguably in the world. We have a City of London Police that's focused on protective security and the measures that go with it. And we have the will for everyone to work in partnership to achieve that aim. And therefore, there is nothing to stop in the next decade for this being the model for other countries, for their metropolitan cities.
Please take the opportunity to actually engage with us, engage with the City of London Police around how you would see the City of London policed now and in the future. And as I've said, we don't have all the answers. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear about your ideas and how the city should be policed in the future.